I've got the Mineralocity platform pulled up. Um, you can see I've turned on some extra tabs. So on this area of interest tab, I've selected the area that we're interested in. So in this case, we have a client who's interested in greenfielding a new aggregate operation, sand and gravel or crushed stone somewhere in the Denver region. And if we go to the market supply and demand estimates, you can see why there's a lot of interest in this region. So as Jenny pointed out earlier, there's a huge deficit in the Denver area. It's growing rapidly. There's a lot of supply coming from within the region, but then there's also a lot of imported supply that's coming in from outside. And so this map tells you that if there was a larger local source within this area, it would find an immediate market. If you look at future demand, and I find this really interesting, you can see that the growth along this Colorado Front Range area is extending from Cheyenne, where there's currently a surplus of material that's flowing down into the Denver area. The growth is actually extending up into that area, and it's extending all the way south down to Pueblo. So for this case study, we're going to look down between Colorado Springs and Pueblo, since both of those areas are growing, north and south are growing together, and it's an area of future demand, and it's somewhere that we can probably permit a new mine because it's far enough outside of the current area, but it's got a long future potential. You know, there's 20 plus years of potential growth and mine life in this area if we can find a good deposit. So let's use Mineralocity Aggregates to do that. We've already taken this. This is our high-level market analysis. We know that there's population growth. There's all the demand drivers are there. So let's go back to our area of interest tab. And what I've turned on here is I have all the current producers turned on with their bubbles. And these bubbles indicate producer size. So we can see in these alluvial fans, we've also turned on the geology layer and we've limited it to producers who are currently producing on the layer. So this is only showing geology that's currently producing construction aggregates. You can see in the Denver area, there's some large crushed stone producers up in this crushed stone unit, this hard rock unit. And then there's these alluvial fans that spread out into the plains. And you can see all of these localized producers that are down along here. So let's zoom in a little bit. We talked about finding something between Colorado Springs and Pueblo. Now, if we zoom in, we can see there's this great alluvial fan that runs right through here, and it already has some producers on it. That red and blue that you just saw pop up as I zoomed in, this is our population. And what we've done is we've taken the census tracts, and instead of having the population spread across the tracts and then the excess just distributed across the county, we've actually taken it and narrowed it down to a much tighter grid, and it's able to actually see where the population is instead of just looking at large polygons. So this is our area of interest. Let's take a closer look. Let's look at our grid. So when you pull up the grid, like Jenny said, this is a high-level market analysis that takes into account the geology. It looks at if an area is incorporated or not, because those areas tend to be more difficult to permit. It looks at current land use, and it looks at geology. And you can see here, just happens to correlate with our geological unit here. There's this alluvial fan that kind of comes up through here that is favorable for sand and gravel production. There are already producers on this unit that you can see. And then in the grid, you can see it correlates. So let's take a little bit of a deeper look here. Ideally, if we're locating an operation along here and we want a long mine life, we know there's a local truck market that's really excellent. But what if we want to get up into the Denver metro? What if we want to be able to send material up there? Because we know there's a deficit. We know pricing's really strong based on that. So I'm going to go in here and I'm going to turn on the railroads. Okay. So what we have here is a really interesting opportunity where we have an alluvial fan that's favorable for sand and gravel production, that's located on the rail, and it's within our area of interest. So we know it's between two growing metros. And we've been able to determine all this with the Mineralocity platform in about 5 minutes. So you can see the amount of time savings, and you can do this across the entire country. We're just looking at one specific area. So we've looked at the grid, we've looked at the market supply and demand. Let's zoom in here a little more and let's take a closer look at the grid. So we've got these areas, and the dark red is the most favorable. So let's click on one of these squares, a half mile by half mile square. We can see over here that there is a large demand, a smaller supply, a significant deficit. Population growth is expected to be really good. Now, this is within the truck market. So just within the truck market, you could probably put an operation here that produces upwards of 500,000 tons a year. It would find a local market just with trucking. But we're also on the rail. And so we'll dig a little bit deeper into how we can utilize that. Looking at this, so there's no stone producers. That makes sense. It's an alluvial plain. We've got a little bit, okay, in our geology, we've got alluvial sediments from the Holocene era. They're less than 100 feet, which is fine. We don't need much more than that. There are currently 8 different sand and gravel producers on this geological unit, and combined, they're producing somewhere between 1.5 and 2.5 million tons. So this is a favorable unit, and they're primarily producing construction sand and probably gravel as well. But as many of you know, construction sand, concrete sand is in high demand and growing across the country. So this could be an ideal area, ideal unit. So let's narrow it down a little more. It's got an A plus. And then looking at the Dodge construction data, there are 46 projects that are either pre-permitting, permitting, or somewhere in the early planning and development phases, worth approximately $1.13 billion. So significant amount of actual planned projects, as well as just the regular demand that comes with the population growth in the area. So this is a really ideal spot. But what do we do now? Now we know this is a good area. It's growing. We've identified an area along the rail that coincides with favorable geology. We've looked at the market. Let's take a minute and go over to the regrid parcel data. And this is where we actually can get down into the site selection process. So I'm going to turn back on our rail over here on the regrid. And you can see our rail running through here. You can see all the parcels. We're going to narrow it down just a little bit. So for an operation like this, we're talking about a rail spur, maybe not immediately, but in the future. We're talking about significant volumes of production. We're going to need to move a lot of trucks in and out. Potentially need to do some overburden storage, settling ponds, whatever. So we need to make sure we have significant acreage. So let's start with, we want to find a parcel that's 200 acres in this area. So I turn on our filtering here within regrid, and now you can see it's only showing parcels that are greater than 200 acres within this area. And if we want to narrow it down even more with the geology and everything else, we can actually turn on the grid. We can actually see my grid's not turning on right now. It's all right. Sometimes it's a little sensitive about if you're zoomed in too far. More importantly, we can just turn on the geology, which is really helpful. So now we can see that, and again, this is generalized. So local exploration and drilling is going to be necessary. This is the general geology layer. This unit could be off, plus or minus 1,000 feet or more. But you can see here that it tends to be that the geology unit that we're chasing is east of the rail track. So we're going to look for parcels on that side. We're going to try to find something that looks ideal. This looks pretty good right here. Like I said, this is probably mostly alluvial. You need to do some drilling, but we could actually even narrow it down further. and look for a parcel that is a little bit more on the rail. Okay, here's something. So this parcel we're in our market. We're on the rail. It's got a significant amount of rail frontage here. It's got a mile approximately of rail frontage. It's within our geology unit. It's currently being used for grazing, so it's light agriculture. Um, there's approximately, it's under local, local private ownership. There's there's a lot of data here when it comes to our parcel data. So it's about 1,500 acres here. Okay, 1,200 acres. So we've got a significant amount of land here that would be large enough to potentially sustain a pretty major operation for a number of years. And you can see here that it's private. It's currently agriculture use. So this would be a good potential greenfield target that you could go in, you could option, drill, do your testing, continue your due diligence. But you can do this, you can continue up and down the rail within this area where you know the market's good, and you can generate a whole list of potential targets that could potentially be optioned, explored, and potentially turn into a greenfield site. So this is one way that you can use Mineralocity Aggregates to greenfield sites and take what could potentially be weeks or even months of research and manual work and do it, in an hour. You can sit down within a region like this and come up with 10 different targets that have high potential, and you can vet them out a number of different ways. So let's say our appetite isn't quite, large quarry with a rail spur and everything else. We really just want to look at the truck market. I find the drive time analysis tool to be incredibly useful for this. So this is approximately where our parcel was. I'm going to go ahead and zoom out here. So you can see this is our local market. You can see our competitors that would compete within this market. And you can see that between where we're at and Colorado Springs, there are very few competitors. We'd be very competitive there. Within Pueblo, also very competitive. There's a lot of information, a lot of aggregates being trucked in from north and south, or east and west, mostly a little bit north and south, but would be very competitive to the north and very competitive directly to the south. And you can see that within our market, I'm going to turn on the side-by-side comparisons. We've got a population of 87,000 within a 30-minute drive, 781,000 within a 60-minute drive, and over 2.5 million within a 90-minute drive. So the truck market alone could sustain this operation at a high level for a lot of number of years. And with the rail options, that stretches even further, which is awesome. That's what you want, is the ability to be able to do both. And you can see that even trucking, we're getting half of Denver, the south half of Denver, and the metro and all the suburbs down here are all included. And based on what we saw before with the supply and demand future estimate, these areas are also projected to continue to grow into the future. So that's what I have for my case study, just showing you one area and how in about 15 minutes, plus or minus a couple minutes, we were able to generate we could generate a whole list of potential greenfield acquisition sites and development sites in the Denver area using the Mineralocity Aggregates tool. And you can take that same process and you can look at M&A targets with expansion possibilities. You could look at regional potential to roll up operations and combine them, because you can see where they have overlaps in the market, where the market's heading, and where improvements can be made. And these are just a couple of small examples of how this tool can really be used to grow and expand your aggregate business. Or if you're a supplier to the industry, you can use it the opposite direction to find out where suppliers are, good places to place service centers, distribution centers, where to deploy sales teams, where they'll be able to capture the most operations within a reasonable drive time. And the list just goes on and on.